Welcome, Dr. Kate. Let's just get started with the questions. So if you could tell me, what does a naturopath do, and specifically, what do you do?
Well, firstly, a naturopath, we tend to work with something called root cause. So what we're interested in doing, and this isn't about sort of bashing Western medicine, because a lot of practitioners are coming over our way, but what we actually do is we want to look at the root cause of why people are unwell. And it can be from a psychological perspective, it can be a physical perspective. Often it's a combination, because we know that trauma and things that have happened to people, et cetera, have really had a huge effect on their health in general. We want to work with people that kind of want to avoid possible medical intervention and medication, because of course, particularly in the United States, although this is kind of across the world, but we very much see it here, is we are not a country of prevention. We're very much a country of medication, so that we can get people to feel better, but we actually don't correct their problems. And of course, over time, their health continues to degrade. They need more medication, and they never actually get better. So we like to work with people that they believe that their body has a remarkable ability to heal itself, provided we give them the right tools and the right environment. Then we get wonderful outcomes. I think that probably one of the most important things is that people need to understand that if we really get an inherent understanding of their core systems and how they're working, we can actually take chronic conditions, autoimmune diseases, and all these types of things, and we can actually potentially reverse them. So we come from a very different point of view. We spend a lot more time with our patients, getting to know who they are, what makes them who they are, what's their home like, what's happened to them over the years, what their symptoms are like, and we really drill down on the individual symptoms, because symptoms just in general tell you so much about what's going on, and combinations of symptoms also tell you what's going on. And of course, if you don't throw in good old stress to decide what the stress triggers are for our patients, then you can start treating certain things, but if you don't have an inherent understanding of that, you're not going to get too far up the road. So that's kind of what a naturopath does.
Thank you. And could you tell me more about how does our immune system work?
Sure. The immune system is basically it's really our attack system. It protects us. There are a number of different types of physical functions that work with this process, but essentially it's protecting us from all kinds of horrible things that can get into our system and make us sick. We use different types of body parts, if you will, like our lymph, our circulatory, our musculoskeletal, we use our digestive system. All of these things have inbuilt protectors in them to keep us healthy. So if any of those systems fail, our immune system, then we're likely to get sick or something's going to happen.
Can you maybe elaborate more and give me an example?
Well, let's probably, yeah, okay. A human digestive tract is a long tube, and it's open at the beginning and it's kind of open at the end. So whatever harmful things there are in the environment or what we're putting into our digestive system, it's going to go in there and it's going to create microtoxins, it's going to create chemicals, and all of a sudden it's going to create a difficulty. So the question is how do we survive if it's going in, it's affecting us? How is our immune system actually going to survive? So it's really designed to have super healthy gut flora, which is indigenous to you or indigenous to me. We both make our own kinds, are kind of similar, and they have a really great ability to neutralize toxic substances. So we also call them inactive histamines, and they also do a great job of chelating heavy metals and all the other kinds of stuff that we're exposed to, and other poisons, however that goes. These beneficial bacteria absorb all of this, and they actually make them inactive. So the healthier that immune system is working, those bacterial levels are working, those physical functions are working, the less likely it is that you're going to get sick. So it's your own kind of Bastille, it's your own castle, it's protecting you, and it's got a really, really healthy moat around it.
Yeah. So now we can see that the gut health is really related to the immune health, and that was going to come in my next question. and maybe elaborate more, and how can it affect, how can leaky gut affect our immune system? What's the causes of leaky gut? And also these sensitivities that we get um, from foods that we didn't have before, and isn't that from a gut issue that affects our immune system?
Look, essentially it is. I mean, without protection, the gut wall, it's open to anything that comes along, so anything. So traditionally our gut wall should be nice and tight. We call them junctions. So if you can imagine them being nice and tight, and all of a sudden over time, because of, the erosion of the chemicals and the poor eating and viruses, et cetera, these junctions start to separate a little bit. And then what happens is that when you actually eat food, it comes into your gut, it's taken apart by your digestive enzymes, it's using micro and macronutrients to do what you got to do. But all of a sudden, some of these things start to escape through the gut wall and into your system. The immediate response of the body, because that shouldn't be there, these shouldn't be in your bloodstream, they shouldn't be anywhere but in your gut being processed, the body starts to attack. And rightly so, because these are not supposed to be there. But the result of that attack is we end up with chronic inflammation. So it starts in the gut, and then it kind of extends out through the rest of the body. And everybody has, strong points and weak points. And so for one, it might be a gut issue. For somebody else, it might be an autoimmune disease like rheumatoid arthritis. For somebody else, it might have a profound effect on depression and anxiety. But all of these things in the system that shouldn't be there, the body's doing its job, it's attacking. But within that attacking, it creates that inflammatory response. So a lot of people don't realize that it can be something as simple as a virus that just gets in there, but it's no big deal. It can be mold. It can be an overgrowth of candida. It can be, different types of parasites, et cetera. All of these things create a harmful environment for the things that we're trying to do. So if we can care for that, like a beautiful garden, and water it and give it the right nutrients, then presumably the whole idea is we'll have this really robust immune system, which is just going to work beautifully, and we're not going to get sick. We're not going to get very sick anyway.
Great. And I know from my own experience, you have helped me to do these tests and discovered what I had in my gut. And we worked together slowly to correct these issues. And I can see how my immune system is stronger now. And you have mentioned that it also affects the autoimmune, like rheumatoid arthritis.
Mm-hmm.
I would like you to really elaborate more about the causes of autoimmune diseases and how can we prevent and maybe reverse them?
Well, first of all, autoimmune diseases, it's interesting. When we look back 100, 150 years, we didn't really see a lot of documentation on this. Like, we didn't see people having these particular complaints. And now we're seeing it a lot. Autoimmune diseases are very much about an abnormal immune response that a functioning body has. So whatever's happened, the body is attacking itself. And some of the types of autoimmune diseases that people don't realize are autoimmune would be things like thyroid, diabetes type 1, IBS, diverticulitis, multiple sclerosis, psoriasis, lupus, celiac, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis. These are all examples of the body actually attacking itself. So if we just look at that in essence, the body attacking itself, and we come back to just the bare basics, so let's come back to root cause. We ask, as with what I do, why is the body doing that? How can I turn those signals off? And one of the ways that we do it is we address where is the systemic inflammation coming from? So what is the root cause? And it can be multiple causes too, Geta. It doesn't necessarily have to be one. But what are the root causes of making your body just go crazy and attacking the situation? We sometimes have to go way back. Sometimes we have to go way back to trauma. Sometimes we have to go way back to childhood sicknesses. Sometimes we have to look at the current, I know we'll talk about this later, but the current state of medications and the clustering effect of medications. They have a lot to answer for. They turn some of these responses on because it's not allowing the body to heal. It's simply masking a difficulty. So we want to figure that out. But autoimmune diseases are something that we've really seen go crazy in the last, let's say 20 to 30 years. And I think it's because of the kinds of foods we eat. They're just processed. There's no nutrient values in them. They've got so many chemicals in them that they're affecting us at a very cellular level. It's really scary what they're doing at a really base cellular level. A lot of the additives to food, et cetera, are actually stopping our cells from excreting or getting rid of toxins, and they're not allowing them to bring in nutrients. And the reality is if you're not well at a cellular level, then nothing's going to work very well for you. And these particular conditions are only going to get worse. So just as time has gone by and we've added more stress to our lives, and of course that's affecting autoimmune too. I mean, when someone comes in with profound rheumatoid arthritis, and their hands are all curled and they're in agony, and we start talking about stressors, and they're like, no, it's my hands. And I'm like, wait. We have to go back and look at the stressors, because that's creating part of this inflammatory response. The foods that you are eating are actually creating this inflammatory response. So if we look at those things quite specifically and look at them in their entirety, each component, we can turn that off. And so people who have historically had chronic conditions like this and are traditionally on a lot of medications for it, or some, we manage to get them off their meds and they actually go into remission. They actually don't have the particular symptoms anymore. The other thing that's really interesting is that people often think that's going to be a long process, but it's not, because once we turn the stressors off, once we turn that inflammatory response off, and the body gets used to living in that reality, then they get better very quickly. The thing that takes us a little time is that one of the things about the body is it's extraordinarily clever. So it learns to survive. It learns to live in a really unhealthy state. And usually things like cancer or things, very, very serious life-threatening diseases happen because the body just can't keep up the game anymore. Additionally, that kind of behavior has been in the works for a very long time because the body's protected us from getting those life-threatening diseases. It's just that by the time we get them, the body has been in the fight of its life, doing everything it knows to be true to try to prevent those mutations and try to prevent that reality.
Very interesting. And I think it gives hope to many patients with autoimmune disease. I just wanted you to elaborate more when you said stressors. You did mention food that cause inflammation. What other stressors are there? And my other part of the question, it's very interesting to me how you look at the patient in a holistic way, and you also look at the traumas and childhood diseases and how that affects their autoimmune. If you can elaborate more, maybe giving us an example of a patient and how you worked with that patient and helped with their autoimmune disease.
Okay. An example would be, we see a lot of women with thyroid conditions. And often when they come to us, the first thing they say is, first thing we ask them for is their most current blood work. And we'll often see, they'll say, and the doctor said that everything's fine. And in our world, we have some different measurements with regard to current blood work results. And also from an observation perspective, we can see that there's clearly some thyroid related difficulties. And they're very convinced, I've been told I'm fine. And I was told this 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and I'm fine. Except our patient has a myriad of symptoms, of which I'll describe a couple of them, but they'll have bloating and gas and headaches and fatigue and aches and pains, and psychologically, they're not very happy. They're, dealing with a little depression. They've got anxiety. That's not okay. That's not okay. So we have to, I would say that 80% of the ladies that I treat, particularly women, because it seems to be much more female related, have these types of symptoms, and it's supposed to be okay. It's supposed to be in their head. It's supposed to be okay. But the reality is that it's not. Now, we look at a whole bunch of things that are related around that, but the number one thing will be stress. So they've got adrenal overload. Their adrenals are very tired. They're not managing to just get on top of things. They're often taking medications to squelch the symptoms because they feel so bad, which is in turn making them sicker. So 80% of the population of women that we see has some issue like that. Other things that we see quite regularly are pre-diabetics. And again, something for type 2, it's completely preventable. We can change it with diet almost in a heartbeat. It's that, that profound that we can do that. But they're going down the rabbit hole of these symptoms and they're being told that there's nothing we can do about it. There's nothing we can do about it except give them medication and then try to maintain the current stasis. So just the things that we look at, I mean, we go right back. I have patients who have profound digestive issues. And what's really interesting about that is it stems back to them as children, often having lots of earaches and sinus problems and tonsils and all kinds of things where they were given a ton of antibiotics. So this started, 20, 30, 40 years ago, where we started to denude their gut. We started to create an inflammatory situation then. And now they've got an autoimmune disease. And we wondered, the body has been attacking itself because we've been attacking the body by giving it things that just aren't suitable in a human body and or fix one thing, but certainly ruin other things. So we also have patients who have been on systemic long-term medications. And again, the side effects of those medications are crazy, particularly if you take more than one. I had a patient come in once who had tremors and had been diagnosed with Parkinson's. We had a look at their medications. They were on 17 different types of medications. Of the 17, 8 of them were exactly the same. They just had a different name. Now, the side effects of those 7 that were clustered together, wait for it, tremors. Guess what? They stopped those 7, the tremors stopped, and the Western world said, oops, sorry, you didn't actually have Parkinson's. We just kind of overdosed you on these things, and we created the tremor situation. So this person believed that they had Parkinson's for quite some time. So it's, pretty devastating diagnosis than to be told, no, that you don't. So it's just, the other thing that we see a lot too is people that have sustained trauma in their life, whether it's acute trauma, it's just happened, or whether it's chronic, it happened a long time ago. A lot of those stressors are still kind of circulating around in their system, and they're still trying to deal with them. Well, in doing that, it's creating a lot of inflammatory situations. One of the things I'm seeing, again, surprisingly, is early onset MS now. We're seeing it in 20 and 30-year-olds. We used to see it when you were a little bit older, but now we're seeing it. And when we really start to drill down, and I'm not saying that every single time, Peter, that we can pinpoint a trauma, and that's why they have MS. That's not how this works. But what we do see in many of the cases is that they have sustained significant trauma. They're either still living it, or it's already happened and they're still living it. And now they're exhibiting MS, and we can see in their MRIs that there's extra white matter. We can see that they in fact have a diagnosis of MS, but they all share this common trauma, very, very stressed situation. They all share this. There's not one person so far that I've ever met that hasn't had some, component of that. And I don't mean a little bit. I mean a lot. So it's just, again, this is stuff that we're seeing that we just didn't see, 20, 30, 40 years ago, not at the same level, because our stress levels continue to go up. Our environmental stressors that affect us are getting worse and worse. The medication situation is getting out of hand in terms of how we're just handing medication out willy-nilly just to keep people happy and to make them feel better, but not sort of anything else. So all of these things are just contributing to this autoimmune almost epidemic that we have. We call diabetes type 2 an epidemic because it's something that's just spread throughout the world. 1 in 4 people actually are diabetics now, and 1 in 11 don't even know they have it, and they're exhibiting really bad symptoms. So they come in and they go through their symptoms, and you look at their numbers, and you're like, actually, you're a diabetic. Oh, no, I'm not. You're like, yes, you are. We could almost call, it's hard to say thyroid disease an epidemic, but it kind of is when you think about where it's coming from and how we've proceeded to this point where It's extremely rare for me to treat women who don't have some kind of sluggish thyroid. It's extremely rare for me to treat people who don't have adrenal overload. It's extremely rare for me to treat people that probably 70% of the patients are pre-diabetic. So, and of the 70%, probably 40% know it and the other 30% don't. They just have no idea that they're actually teetering.
Yeah, about thyroid, I also know that they base it on the average population numbers to get those criteria, and
Yes.
they keep changing them according to the population. So as the population gets sicker, let's say, the average will change, and they would say these are normal. But I
And
know,
they've not, that's absolutely correct. And the other thing that they don't take into account is other medications that patients are taking. They don't take into account diet, exercise levels, or any other contributing factors as to how somebody got to that place. And the other one that they don't take into consideration, of course, is stressors. Trauma, stress. They haven't even really touched on that yet. So there's so many other things we need to throw in this bucket in order to grade somebody on this, but we don't.
so Dr. Kate, this is very interesting to me. How would someone touch on their own stressors in terms of trauma and get to resolve these issues? Is it through traditional therapy, or do you have other ways to do that with your patients?
Something that we've started to look at more and more and more. Let me go backwards for a second. One of the things that I've realized is that if I don't get a firm handle on neurotransmitters, so the things in the brain that make you who you are, and also with regard to levels, whether you're happy, whether you're sad, whether you're depressed, anxious, whether there's habitual behavior. So as an example, a weight loss patient, if we don't look at their neurotransmitters, I don't care how much we change their diet, they're going to go back to habitual behavior, and they're going to have their anxiety and their depressions, which then send them back to eating. Does that make sense? If we don't look at the brain and bring that into the whole story, then I think we're only doing kind of half the story. So with regard to trauma, etc., again, we can heal your body to a point, but if the brain's not working, if it's not connecting with that story, then it's a really tough road to go down, because you know what you should be doing and you know what you want to do, but if you've got different directives for trauma, for medication, for whatever the reasons happen to be, it leads you back down the other road, the less positive road. So in answer to your question, we look at neurotransmitters. We do, at the practice that I'm in, we do urine and saliva testing, looks at two quite specific things. One is the neurotransmitters that direct a lot of this, or all of it, I should say. And then the second thing is we do, that's with the urine testing. With the saliva testing, we look at cortisol output, because again, people who have, people come in and say, Dr. Kate, I'm anxious. I don't know why. I can't actually even pinpoint why all of a sudden I have dread, or I feel fearful. Or one minute I'm happy and the next minute I can't get out of bed, or, whatever it happens to be. And I don't know what's wrong with me. We need to look at those, because if we can correct those in a very natural way, using very natural supplements, all of a sudden the physical part becomes so much easier. It just becomes so much easier, because the brain and the gut are working hand in hand. I mean, we call the gut the second brain, and it very much is. But when we can fix that and we can make it kind of pretty, and it's all going to be happening. But if the connection is interrupted and we're not working with the brain, then I don't know about the sustainability, because the body's stubborn. It's learned to survive, irrespective of what we throw at it, what we do to it. It survives, but it learns some very bad habits to keep you alive, because it's survival. So we've got to change both areas. We've got to look at the brain and the gut in order to get that to happen.
Yeah, from my personal experience with my anxiety, I did that urine and saliva test, and I take the supplements. One of them has GABA in it, and I do feel more calm with them. And I like that we're working on it in a natural way. It does work for me. Yes.
Well, the other great thing too, sweetheart, is that we don't, this is very scientific. It's very precise. You know, we're not trying to throw half-cooked spaghetti at a wall and hope it sticks. And that's what I love about those testings, because we know that there's a disconnect. We know that some of the levels perhaps aren't chemically working the way they need to be, but this test actually allows us to be very precise with the dosing, and generally it doesn't take very long for people to start to see an effect.
So, Dr. Kate, for those people who don't have the access to do this neurotransmitter testing or the urine saliva test, and they're at home and they realize that trauma could be affecting their health, what advice would you tell them to do?
Well, the very first thing I would do is I would start to work on their diet, environment, just being outside, getting some fresh air, and maybe getting some help, even if it's online, with regard to just working through what's going on with them. Because it can be a very lonely place when you're by yourself and you're trying to figure it all out. And there's still a burden of shame, for whatever reason, that people feel that if they require help, that people are going to see them differently. And in our world, we're excited. We're excited to go down that path with people, because we understand everybody has their thing. Everybody has their thing. So we've got to work out how to help people to fix it. So being at home, the very first thing I would do is I would start to address the gut, because improving gut health and reducing the bad bacteria and increasing the good bacteria is going to make people feel more in control. They're going to feel happier. If they have weight issues, they're just naturally going to lose weight, because once you get that in stasis, the body will reward you by reducing some inflammation. And often, being obese is about inflammation. So it's about the body. People often say, no, it's these big chunks of fat. Well, it is, but it's predicated by inflammation. Reduce the inflammation and some of that stuff goes away. So the other things I would do at home, other than, is try not to over supplement yourself. We're turning into a country of massive supplementers. I get patients who come in with bagfuls of stuff. And I'm not against supplementation. Of course, I use it, but right time, right place. And I believe that one should work root cause first. And then sometimes when I see a patient, I make personal notes to myself. We're going to start them on this, but I'm going to make personal notes that there's 10 other things that really technically that's going on that we need to address. But if I can pick root cause, often what happens is that I don't need to do the other 9 things. So when you overdo supplements, the body actually considers that a burden, and it will discard a lot of that. The body doesn't sit inside and go, I'll have one of those and I'll have one of those, and no, I don't want any of that today. What it traditionally does is it either uses it in a really good way, or it just discards the lot. And as I'm very famous for saying, that you end up with really expensive pee-pee, because it all goes into the toilet bowl. So often, in order to treat somebody, we have to take them off of most of their stuff and then reintroduce as is appropriate, and whether they need it or not. And sometimes taking things in combination can be a little detrimental as well, if you're not familiar with them. So yeah, looking at the supplements, looking at the diet, exercise. And I don't mean going out to the gym and lifting weights. I mean, really just to start, go outside and have a walk, gentle, no huffing and puffing, deep breaths. And that's just going to help on a cellular level. So these are just a couple of things that one could pretty much change their entire health profile.
That's great. And when you said about the gut health, increasing the good bacteria, are you saying supplementing with probiotics, prebiotics, eating food that contains that? Could you tell me more?
Yeah. A couple of things with regard to gut health. And again, I know you've heard me say this, but don't think of food as good or bad. Think of it in terms of what is appropriate for you. So if you're doing this at home and you're trying to figure out this story on your own, then first of all, you need to look at your symptom profile. So, and again, I'm going to throw out a couple of things. There are a million things here, but traditional things that tell you that the food you're eating is not working for you. And let's presume for a moment that you're not eating processed food anymore. And let's presume that, it's relatively fresh and et cetera. If you're bloating, if you have gas, if you have a headache, any rashes, often gum bleeding is an indicator. You're not sleeping well. You're not eliminating well. So you've either got diarrhea or you've got constipation or you've got one or the other. These are really classic food sensitivity signs. And again, I come back to that. Don't think of food as good or bad, because the reality is that some food that's good can still have this effect on you. And we often see this with food that, even though it's really good for you, people have overdone it. They've eaten too much of that food group. And sometimes they can do it with one, but once you have a cluster effect, we get a problem. I'll give you an example. Avocados are really good for you. Big fan, want everybody to eat avocados. Spinach is really good for you. Big fan, same thing. But for people who have eaten avocados and spinach, and now they've got a lot of internal inflammation, and they get a lot of, their body starts to recognize those foods as what we call them as high histamine foods. Sometimes they can eat one and they're okay, but if they eat both, they end up with difficulties. And this is kind of new. We're starting to learn that the body has a cutoff point sometimes, not everybody, but some people do. So coming back to that diet and just being really mindful of what's affecting you. And I'll say something else too. Often the thing you love the most is often the thing you're most sensitive to. So people will come in and say, I'm cutting everything out but that. And I'm like, but all of your symptoms are still there. And I think if we cut that out, we might be okay. And I have to say to everybody, when we cut stuff out, it's not forever necessarily. It's just to give your body a break to heal. It's allow your body to get its act together. And then sometimes we can reintroduce these things back. Probiotics, I have some very defined views on probiotics. I love them. I don't think they should ever be taken as a yogurt, that consideration. Remember, Candida, we're putting it probiotic predominantly to put back some good bacteria, but we often use them to try and control a little Candida. Candida likes sugar. In fact, it loves sugar. And a lot of the probiotics on the market that you eat or you ingest often have some level of sugar in them. So it's really weird. We're trying to replace the bacteria, but on the other hand, we're feeding the Candida with the shovel, saying, here, eat this. So it doesn't actually, take care of the problem. The other thing I think about probiotics is they should be live wherever possible. If you're traveling, okay, I get it. You can't have them in a refrigerator all the time, but that's why they have such high numbers for the bacterial levels, because you're going to have die off if they're sitting on a shelf. So they're gonna, they're essentially going to die off. And so you might have 50 billion, but you might end up with 3 billion. You know what I mean? So those numbers, when they're in stasis, can be very key critical. So having probiotics that are alive. Prebiotics, again, I don't use prebiotics that much. I get such a great result out of a probiotic diet that I don't really need to add the extra one at this point. And then elimination. We've got to make sure that you're pooping, because if you're not, it's going to stay inside. It's going to become toxic. It's going to create inflammation. It's going to inflame your colon. And then and again, that's something that's quite habitual. So if you're not going to the bathroom over a long period of time, it's because your body's gotten quite lazy. And so we have to teach it to respond with peristalsis to to eating and to metabolic, whatever's going on with that. So yeah, does that answer your question?
It did, yes. And I've been also thinking of the supplement when you said it's good to, wean out of the supplements and just take the necessary. And I'm thinking of who's viewing this interview. If they really don't know what supplements they need and they just wanted to take the minimum basic supplements, maybe vitamin D or zinc or magnesium or probiotics or enzymes, I don't know. If you would, what supplements you would say are the basics and everybody should take?
Okay. Well, firstly, everybody should take vitamin D, and that includes children. Dosages are very important, and I rate it on whether we're talking about pediatrics, whether we're talking about middle-aged people, whether we're talking about geriatrics. So we need to figure that out. The basic, I guess, dosage, and let's say you haven't been diagnosed with a deficiency for vitamin D, would be something on the order of maybe 1,000. 1,000 is fine. Vitamin C, is, again, something, it's a water soluble vitamin. We don't traditionally keep it in our system, so we need to kind of fill it up. So I say 500 every day. And then if you are feeling like you're going to get a cold or something, you can up it to a couple of thousand a day. And you can do that 2 to 3 times a day. We often say with vitamin C, you can take it to bowel tolerance. So if you get diarrhea, you've taken too much, but that's about the extent of it. It won't hurt you. So you can up that one. I am a big fan of a digestive enzyme. I believe that the majority of the Earth's population have some disconnect with regard to their digestive enzymes. And I like to just use a really basic one that I can give children and I can give adults, which is a papaya enzyme. It's really simple. They often get you to want to chew 2 or 3 or 4 after a meal. I'm a big fan of just one. And after each meal, and what it does is it just helps your body assimilate and break down a little bit more effectively and efficiently than it has been doing. So most people sort of require that. Those are kind of the hardcore basics. The other one that I really like, but this is something I like to titrate around a little bit, is magnesium. I think, again, magnesium is a water soluble mineral. It's something that we use. It's great for going to the bathroom. It's great for people who experience cramping, particularly in the evening when they're sleeping. It's great for calming. It's a very calming mineral that is incredibly important. So it's very valuable. Magnesium comes in a whole bunch of different forms. So depending upon what we want to use it for would depend. There's a glycinate, a citrate, a threonate. So it depends on what you want to achieve. So just read, do your research. If you're at home and you don't have a lot of access, just figure out which one's the most appropriate for you. And then there's probably a couple of other things I'd zing around there, just depending upon what somebody requires. But those are the basics. Those are the basics that will, and this is predicating on the fact that you're probably trying to eat a little bit better. The one thing I caution patients on is B complexes, B12s. We need to be assured that in fact that's what you need. And then there are different types of B complexes that you can take, and some people are more sensitive than others. So some people can do well with them. Some people can make themselves quite sick. We need them. We need them at a cellular level. Bs are super important, but we need to figure out which ones. So don't necessarily self-diagnose and take that one without a little guidance, but the rest of them, absolutely.
Thank you. And then the question I'm getting is, how do genes play a role in autoimmune diseases?
The jury's out with that right now. They don't really have any hardcore evidence, except the 2 things they've studied the most are rheumatoid arthritis and probably type 1 diabetes. They do think there's definitely some gene expressions that we can see that we can correlate and say, hey, you know what, that sure looks genetically related. But to some large degree, so much of what's going on with us is environmental and diet related and medication related and stress related that I certainly know I live a little differently than, say, my parents did. And I don't have all the issues that they have. So I don't have high cholesterol. I don't have high blood pressure. There's, and yet in the old days, they were like, if your dad had it or your mom had it, you were going to have it. And I know when we're doing a medical history, we ask, tell us about your family. The ones I focus on the most would be diabetes, type 1, and type 2 is environmental. Type 2 is lifestyle. So, and the reason that they've thought it was genetic is because who taught you how to eat? Where did you get all your information from? So of course, with that in mind, of course, that's how it got flowed down the generations. So the answer to the question to your answer is there's not a lot of good information right now on that, except to say that let's just assume that the majority of it are for those other reasons we've discussed.
I see. So I just want to put it in other words, just to make sure. What I understand is that genetically, if we do have that gene, it could be dormant if we have a healthy lifestyle. Like we eat properly, we exercise, we manage our stress.
Yes.
And if these are out of balance, it could have that gene activated.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if it might be there, and then there's no hardcore, we're not, I mean, we're seeing gene expressions in a lot of things, but why it turns on and why it doesn't. And I would suggest that if we are living in a state of a lack of inflammation, it never pops up.
The big question, and it has a big impact on our immune system, is stress. And especially with the pandemic, we've been going through a lot of stress. What are stress symptoms? Because some people say, no, I'm not stressed. This is normal. What should we watch for? And now that we know we're stressed, how can we take easy steps to do? You would recommend easy steps for people to do that they could manage and commit to?
Mm-hmm. Stress can represent itself in a variety of different ways. I mean, it can be something as, simple as brain fog. You can't see the forest through the trees, and it comes and it goes. It can be fatigue. You're just tired all the time. It can be lots of behavioral changes because you're irritable, you're quick to be angry, or you're apathetic, you don't care. Stress can manifest itself in, aches and pains, headaches, constipation, diarrhea, an upset tummy, acid reflux. I mean, these are all indicators that, there's something going on with you, and you're stressed all the time. Your muscles are tight. You're not sleeping well. You're not getting the restorative sleep that you need. So again, that's very stressful for your body. If you're not sleeping, your body can't repair. And if it can't repair over years and years of, chronic insomnia, there are going to be some difficulties with that. So I guess the thing, first and foremost, and I keep coming back to this, but we just have to have a better diet. We have to stop inflaming ourselves, because until we correct that gut microbiome, we're always going to have problems. We're always going to be sick. People who correct their gut come in, and again, an example will come in saying, I've just gone on to anti-anxiety medication or something for depression, but they haven't corrected their gut. So in fact, the meds kind of help, but not really. They still have a lot of those physical symptoms, and they don't really feel like they're progressing. They feel like they're standing still. So now when people come in and say, we think we should get on these things, I'm saying, hold 5. Let's just correct the gut. Let's just get you hydrated. Let's calm the adrenals down so that you're not putting out inappropriate levels of cortisol. And then in a few weeks, how do you feel? Do you feel like you still want to go down that other path? And they're like, nope, feel really good. Or let's go to your primary and let's start asking them to titrate you off the meds that you went on, because you don't need the same levels. You don't need them anymore. And those are meds you don't just stop and start. You have to take them down over a period of time to be safe. So yeah, I mean, it's really just looking after the unit and looking after, that gut health and getting that bacterial levels right. I can't stress that enough. What a profound change that will make to somebody's life. It's hugely profound.
So they should look at their diet and their gut health.
100%. That's number one.
Okay. And for someone listening to you now and would look at their diet, what simple steps they could do?
Probably the very first thing I would do is, and again, this is about healing your gut. So although this might not necessarily apply for a long period of time, I would first of all start to eat regularly. So people have this tendency to skip, they get hypoglycemic, their blood sugar's all over the place, and that's going to contribute to you feeling stressed and happy or sad and all the other things that happen. It also makes weight loss very difficult because the body becomes very proprietary about the fact that you're not eating regularly. So it has this tendency to just want to hold on and not give anything up for a while. So it affects you on a whole bunch of different levels. So the first thing I would do, I just lost my train of thought. Where was I going on this?
About how when they skip meals.
So yeah, so we've got hypoglycemia, so we want to regulate blood sugar. The other thing I would probably do is I would want to probably eliminate a couple of food groups, not necessarily because they're always good or bad, but just because the gut has a really tough time if it needs to be healed to be able to process these things. So one would be dairy, and I mean dairy from a cow. And that includes everything from cream, cheese, milk, whey, W-H-E-Y, casein. These are all derivatives. I would also probably step away from gluten for 5 minutes, just simply because, again, when you don't have a well operating gut, it finds it very difficult to get through all of that. And then the third thing I would have a hard look at is something called lectins. And lectins are things, they come from traditionally beans, rice to some degree. Lectins can be in tomatoes, they can be in eggplant, but these are things that automatically create an inflammatory response in the gut. When the gut is operating well, I want to come back and say that a lot of these things can come back. Okay, this isn't a forever thing. It could be just temporarily. But if you cut those things out, you eat regularly, you hydrate, and watch your external stimulants too. So watch your coffees and your teas. If you're overdoing that and you've got an adrenal function deficiency, so that, your adrenals are doing it tough, and you've got a lot of cortisol going out when it's not supposed to, and perhaps you're not sleeping very well, and perhaps you're constipated or you have diarrhea, then just watch those external stimulants. But if you can just do those really basic things and keep it clean and keep it fresh, and I'll give you an example of how to think about your food. When I was in school a million years ago, we went and we took these kind of microscopy things. And what we did was we wanted to look at food that had come from the farmer's market. And what we saw with that food was we saw almost a bioluminescence. We saw it was almost a glow, and you could see cells moving through, vegetables and fruit and all this kind. And what we were seeing was alive. We were seeing macro or micronutrients that were going to be put back into our body where we do something good with them. And then we went to the regular grocery store and we took the exact same things and we had another look. It was dead. It was black. There was no movement. And so a lot of the foods, it's not always easy to get, fresh foods, but I am a big fan of encouraging people wherever possible to go to the local farmers markets on the weekends, because they have rules about how far away the farmers market has to be, the transportation, and then when they actually pick the goods. Now, whether everybody's being super truthful and that's how that's working, but overall, the food does taste different. It tastes fresher. It has flavors that we'd forgotten when we go to a regular grocery store. So I know it's not possible to do that all the time, but I just want people to imagine that, have that in their mind about when they're ingesting. Are they ingesting a live, nourishing, nutritious kind of stuff, or are they just eating dead stuff? And so, and then with regard to your animal products, I highly encourage people at the very least to have antibiotic and hormone free. That's incredibly important, because the reality is that whatever they put into that animal, you ingest it, I can assure you that we're going to have tissue residue in you. And some of these things can create really big issues down the road. In fact, we now know that some of this stuff really does perpetuate some of these autoimmune things. We know that it's that those kinds of poisons are really creating those environments. So if you have a propensity for it, and now you're eating, meat all week long, and it's just been injected with God knows what, you are literally just transferring that poison into your body and making your life a lot more difficult in terms of how you function.
What tips could you give to help our immune system for life?
Find your happy place.
Easy tips to follow.
Yeah, I think find your happy place. I think we're just so caught up in, it's been a tough couple years, as you know. I mean, it's been a tough many years, but in the last couple of years, it's certainly stretched people's capacity for joy and to be content and all that kind of stuff. And so I think when people find their happy place, then I think that it helps with their health enormously. So immune and just feeling better has this instant effect on your immune system, and you actually get healthier. So that's the first thing. The second thing is again, we'll come back to diet. Try to reduce that systemic inflammation, because just we're inflamed, and the reality is if you don't have inflammation, you cannot have disease. It is impossible. So we want to do that. Another one would be sleeping. People don't realize the importance of sleep. restore. You're like a computer that needs to reboot, and you need quiet time to do it. And if you're not rebooting your system every night when you sleep, then your health will continue to degrade. And we're now akinning some people who are very, very poor sleepers with certain kinds of conditions, certain kinds of diseases. And we see, you know, one of the things I'll ask with certain kinds of diseases is, are you an insomniac? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, you haven't had time to repair. So we need to go back and get you sleeping, not in an artificial sleep. We need to get your brain to learn how to go back to do that properly. So exercise maybe is another one. Again, and do not underestimate, everybody has their level of play, but do not underestimate a good walk every day. You know, a good walk, and as you feel stronger, maybe you pick up your pace, but the mere fact that you are walking out that door and you are moving and you are breathing is going to contribute to your immune system like you wouldn't believe. Identify deficiencies. So if you have marked deficiencies, particularly if we've seen it in your blood work, so if we've seen things like magnesium or B12 or vitamin D, or something that's often missed is low iron, both in men and women. These things can really change the way you feel and breathe and think. And so if we get those basics right and get those baselines right, then it just makes your body just happier to do what it needs to do. And probably the only other thing I want to throw in there, maybe two things. One would be hydrate. We don't drink enough water. We don't drink enough clean water. And I think that that's very important. And then just review the medications that you're on. Constantly review the medications you've been put on, because they have the ability to make you feel happy, to make you feel well. They have the ability to give you some side effects, which you don't even recognize as side effects, but in fact, they actually are. And probably the last thing is just continue to do a mental health check. You know, do a mental health check and understand that if you have anxiety or you have depression, you know, we need to look at it. And we can change a lot of that with diet, but we need to look at it, because with all the best intentions in the world, if there's some chemical things that are out, it's really hard to get ahead. It's just really difficult to get ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Kate, for today.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. It's been wonderful talking to you. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.